Good morning, and for those of you familiar with the celebration of the Catholic Mass, this is normally the part where all of the hard work is over. It's almost time to go and you're just waiting for the end. But I'd like to ask for your indulgence for just a few minutes this morning, maybe a little longer than a few minutes, because I have this story to tell of a very remarkable person, and I think in listening to this story from my point of view, you might take something with you that will help you today, tomorrow, and throughout the rest of your lives. So with that, let me launch into my talk about my father. Glynn Lunney was born into this world on November 27, 1936, and died in his home with family by his side on March 19, 2021. Between those two dates, he had 30,793 days to live his life and carry out his mission here on earth. As you will hear shortly, he made the most of every one of those days and left us with all countless memories because he lived an extraordinary life. Before diving into the details of Glynn Lunney's remarkable life, I want to thank you for taking time to pay your respects to my father and support our family and all those who knew and loved him, particularly to Father Jim for such a beautiful homily that captured the essence of who my father was, and to all the people who helped make this transition time for us so beautiful and so wonderful. To start, I have a simple question. Why are you here today? There's a great deal going on in the world, and funerals are not a very fun place to be, so why did you choose to come and take time out of your life to attend this funeral for the person we knew and loved as Glynn Lunney? While you're thinking about your answer to that question, I will tell you the wonderful tale of one man's life, my father, Glynn Lunney. I will briefly cover what he did, but my real focus today will be on how he did things in his life, and most importantly, why he did things the way he did and how that enabled him to live a most extraordinary life. So let's begin with what Glynn Lunney did with his life. Joseph Glenn Stephen Lunney was born as the first child to Helen and William Lunney on November 27, 1936. Bill was a coal miner and Helen was a registered nurse. He grew up in rural Pennsylvania, and over time he became the older brother to Bill, Jerry, and Carol. He was likely destined to be a coal miner like his father until fate intervened. It seems the nuns and priests at the local Jesuit school had recognized the incredible mind that he was blessed with and did everything in their power to enable him to get a proper education. He graduated high school by 16 and was off to college at the University of Detroit Mercy and obtained his bachelor's degree in aerospace engineering when he was only 19 years of age. To this day, he still does not know exactly who paid for his college education or how his family was able to afford it, and he would always count the generous people from where he grew up as one of the biggest blessings in his life. Shortly after graduation, he found his professional calling and became one of the earliest team members of the fledgling manned spaceflight program. He came to work every day with a passion and enthusiasm that is rarely seen. He brought his lightning-quick mind and natural leadership abilities to bear on whatever task or project he was assigned. It was no surprise at all that he quickly rose to leadership roles and earned designation as flight director before his 29th birthday. In mission control, he was known as Black Flight. He was the flight director on 12 Mercury and Apollo missions. He earned special recognition for his work on Apollo 11 for executing that part of the mission when, for the first time in human history, a craft with 2 human souls aboard would be launched from the moon to rendezvous with the command ship orbiting the moon. He is also famously known for the remarkable work he and his team did throughout the first night after the commander of Apollo 13, Jim Lovell, notified the control center, "Houston, we've had a problem here." Dad developed a reputation for being the quickest mind in the MOCR, or Mission Operations Control Room. He had an almost supernatural ability to look at data, understand what they mean, ask questions, assess options, and immediately know the right thing to do. His track record of accomplishments in manned spaceflight is truly astounding. His career and active participation in spaceflight spanned nearly 50 years. His contributions are extensive and well documented. Some have described them as legendary. A flight director on 12 manned spaceflight missions, program manager on Apollo-Soyuz, program manager for the Shuttle Transportation System, vice president of the Satellite Systems Division for Rockwell, president of Rockwell Space Operations Company, vice president and program manager of spaceflight operations for United Space Alliance. His time and accomplishments in spaceflight have been recognized and honored by so many people and organizations. From receiving the keys to the city of his hometown of Old Forge, Pennsylvania, all the way to being awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom for his work during Apollo, he has earned and been awarded virtually every honor in the space industry. He had the opportunity to meet every United States president and over a 50-year period as a result of his work in manned spaceflight. As the awards and recognition continued to pile up, he and I would frequently discuss what he wanted to say at the acceptance speeches. I always started by asking him, "Dad, what do you really want the audience to know or feel about what your thinking is receiving this award?" And for every award and in every situation, it eventually and simply came down to this: he loved the work he was privileged to do every day, and he respected, admired, and loved the people with whom he got to do that work. He never considered any of the recognition he received as anything other than validation of his belief that he was given a marvelous opportunity and he got to work with the greatest people in the world at what they did. He just simply did what he was supposed to do. Throughout his incredible journey of accomplishments, accolades, respect, and admiration, all things he had earned by what he did in his life, he remained true to who he was, a genuine and humble person. Glynn Lunney had an extraordinary professional life. He did everything and far more than any son of a coal miner from rural Pennsylvania could have ever dreamed of doing. They've made movies, TV shows, documentaries. There have been thousands of written accounts of the work Dad and his fellow space pioneers accomplished. As a matter of fact, if you wanted to pick a movie that best captured Dad's contributions during the formative years of manned spaceflight, you might be tempted to gravitate to one of the blockbusters starring a famous actor or two. However, for me, I believe it may have been another Tom Hanks movie that best captures Glynn Lunney's life as a legendary pioneer and Hall of Famer in manned spaceflight, and that would be the movie Forrest Gump. In Glynn Lunney's life, similar to the main character in that movie, every time some important, meaningful, or otherwise critical step in the progress and success of manned spaceflight occurred, from the 1960s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and even into the 2000s, Glynn Lunney was there, carrying out his part of the mission with courage, passion, and perfection. To put it in today's terms, if Instagram and Twitter had been around since the 1960s, and Glynn Lunney had set up an account on both platforms, and the only thing he ever posted was a brief, perhaps one-paragraph description of the most interesting thing he did that week, I have no doubt he would have more followers, more likes than all of the Kardashians combined. Because the content and the substance, the significance and the impact of the things Glynn Lunney did and the things he was a part of doing are extraordinary in the history of humankind, and he was right there in the driver's seat for a great deal of it. If all you knew about Glynn Lunney was what he did during his life, you would be very tempted to conclude, wow, that is one human being who has done some extraordinary things in his lifetime. And of course, you would be correct. But you would be missing the most important parts of this story. If you stop at what he did, you would miss how he did things and, most importantly, why he did things that way. So let's talk about how he did things. From my earliest memories of my dad, he was always someone who we respected, admired, and loved greatly. As kids, we have a unique ability to feel things but maybe not completely understand them. I have so many I remember a time when memories of things my dad did for me and with me, that it's hard to know where to begin or which ones to include or leave out. I remember a time when, even though he was incredibly busy, landing people on the moon and stuff like that, he always seemed to know when one of us needed some extra attention. One day, he and I were riding in the car, and an old tune, Watching Scotty Grow, a song by Bobby Goldsboro, came on the radio. It's a beautiful, heartfelt song about a father watching his young son grow up and his feelings towards that. Several weeks later, Dad came home and said, "Let's go." Had no idea where we were going, but we wound up at the record shop at Alameda Mall, the place you used to buy music before you could get it all online. And he bought me that record album, and I still have it today. I remember a time we were out on Galveston Bay in our sailboat for a Sunday afternoon boat race. The wind was blowing, the whitecaps were cresting. Shortly after the race, I asked my dad, can I be the helmsman on the windward leg today, which is also the start? And shortly after, he said, "Certainly, son." Shortly after the race started, I made a mistake. I failed to see a header that was coming. The boat got overpowered, and I nearly rounded up right into the boat on our windward side. But of course, Dad saw it coming and had already sprung into action, and we narrowly avoided a nasty collision. The skipper of the other boat yelled, in somewhat of a profanity-laden tirade at my father, expressing his displeasure that he was allowing a child to steer the boat on a day like that. In an equally colorful reply, the essence of what my father said was this: "Dear kind sir, I believe we will both have a much more enjoyable day if you pay attention to what is going on your boat, and I will do the same." We continued on starboard tack as most of the fleet were tacking to port, and who would believe it, but we had the most favorable wind shift in the history of racing out on Galveston Bay. That favorable wind shift allowed us to get to the windward mark, with me steering the boat a full 3 minutes before our next best competitor. As we rounded the windward mark, popped our spinnaker to go down to the leeward mark, which, by the way, the spinnaker on the Sea Devil may have quite possibly been the ugliest in the history of sailboat racing. I saw my dad give one final two-finger salute to the boats behind us, and again, in very colorful language, yelled something to the essence, "My son just kicked all of y'all's butts." But what he was really saying is, "Son, you can make mistakes. I will have your back. I will be here to help you, and I will always support you in whatever you do." I remember a time when we had just arrived at the 18th or 19th version of the last family Lunney vacation at some "where in the heck is this place" cabin out in East Texas. My oldest daughter was recently accepted to the University of Texas, the same school my wife attended, and it was Thanksgiving. If you are from around these parts, everyone knows that Thanksgiving Day was always the annual playing of the rivalry game between Texas and Texas A&M, University of Texas Longhorns, the Texas A&M Fighting Aggies. I've never been a particularly gracious loser, and sometimes I can be a little too competitive. Sadly, the other Lunney children, all of whom were Aggies, and even many of their spouses who were Aggies, were not much better. My family, the Austin Lunneys, were the last to arrive, so everyone was already around the campfire out back when we got there. We just said hello to everyone, and Papa proudly declared, "I want to show everyone something." He unzipped his jacket and took it off to unveil a University of Texas Longhorn shirt he was wearing. All the Aggie Lunneys were like, "What?" Not surprisingly, there was clear and well-thought-out purpose to his perceived madness. First, he wanted to recognize and very publicly congratulate his first granddaughter who had been accepted to college. And second, he was making a very clear statement that no one was going to be allowed to mess with or otherwise antagonize the two Longhorns that this family gathered, because all people are welcome in the Lunney family. The two Longhorns were, of course, my wife and daughter, and once again he was telling me, "Son, I got your back, and I'm preemptively solving this problem before it ever actually exists." I remember a time on one Saturday afternoon I'd gone over to the golf club to get some new golf clubs, try out some new golf clubs, because in golf, of course, you always just need better golf clubs. The club fitter and I talked for quite some time about all kinds of random stuff while the fitting process was going on. But when he asked me to write down my name and email so he could send me the results of the fitting, he noticed that my last name was Lunney. He immediately asked, "Do you know Glynn Lunney?" "Well, I know two Glynn Lunneys. I have a brother and a father." He immediately began telling me what a great leader and person my dad was, because at some time in his distant past, he'd worked in the spaceflight program and had met my dad. He was a huge fan not only of the work Glynn Lunney had done, but how he went about doing it. His final comment was, "Say hello to your dad. He likely does not have any idea who I am, but my interactions with him left a lasting impression on me to what a great person he was." This was not an isolated or rare event. To the contrary, it has happened to me over and over again in my life. People I don't know find out I'm Glynn Lunney's son and proceed to tell me what a great person he is, or how much they enjoyed working with him, or that they had tremendous respect for how he went about doing his business. I wanted to tell a few of these "I remember a time when" stories or memories of things my father had done for me, not because I believe they are unique only to me, quite the opposite. They are the kind of stories that almost everyone who knew Glynn Lunney would have to tell. Whether it was the guard at the entry gate to Johnson Space Center, or the President of the United States, or anyone in between, I observed Dad always working to be kind, thoughtful, and generous to anyone and everyone. Because that is how he believed you should do things, always doing his best to take care of the people around him, loving them, supporting them, helping them, providing for them. It's just who he was. And finally, I remember a time when our family received such an incredible and overwhelming outpouring of sympathies and condolence, followed by, "Is there anything we can do to help?" We have read stories and other postings paying tribute to my dad. The common sentiment reflected in all this outpouring of respect and admiration is, Glynn Lunney was a great man who did things the right way, and we loved having him in our lives. Whether you knew him as a brother, a husband, as a dad, or papa, as a friend, a colleague, an acquaintance, I believe it would not take any of you much time at all to come up with your list of "I remember a time when" moments that you had shared with my father. The more time you spent with him, the more you would have. And if you think about it, The I remember a time when moments are perhaps the greatest gifts we leave behind when we finish our time on this planet. It may sound as though I see my dad as some sort of perfect person or saintly figure, but that's not really true, because just like everyone else, he had his faults and his failings. He could curse with the best of them, flash intense anger if you made him mad, and on occasion enjoyed a rowdy time with friends just as much as the next guy. But isn't that actually the greater point? We are not perfect beings. We make mistakes and sometimes do things the wrong way. But it's the desire, the willingness, and effort to keep working towards better that matters greatly. So now we know not only did Glynn Lunney did accomplish great things in his life, and he was always trying to do things exactly the right way. And if that's all you knew about what my father was, what he did and how he did it, you would be very accurate in saying we should all be so lucky to live such a tremendous life. But you would still be missing the greatest part of who he actually was. Finding your why. It's become some kind of a popular motivational or self-help approach to life. In truth, finding your why, understanding your why, and living your why has been around for a very long time. And I'm certain, just like almost everything else in Dad's life, he had figured out his why very early. As I mentioned earlier, my dad's life was forever changed when the nuns and priests of the local Jesuit school rescued him from the coal mines. He and I never spoke much about the time in Jesuit school, but this much is absolutely clear to me. During that time, he studied, understood, and began a lifelong relationship with a higher power. His view of what we are supposed to do during our time on earth was simple and embodied the teachings of someone who was sent to us 2,000 years ago to forgive our sins and illuminate for us the path to life everlasting. He developed a deep and lasting faith in the word and teachings of Jesus Christ. As complicated as we tend to make so many things in our life, this one is really quite simple. Love one another, take care of one another, be kind to one another, treat everyone you meet the way you would like to be treated, and help one another through this brief time we are here on this planet. It was an easy approach to life and one that seemed to be a natural fit for Dad. There are numerous times in my dad's life where the strength of his faith was evident. About 10 years ago, he could see that life had gotten very busy for me, and as things go, church was often one of the things that fell off the priority list. He knew how valuable faith had been to him in his life, and he could see that I was not being attentive to mine. He recommended I read a book called Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis. Mr. Lewis may be better known for his remarkable works of science fiction, but in this particular book, he was telling the story of something far more interesting. The ideas for the book were developed and first presented on BBC Radio during the midst of World War II, a very, very bleak time in human history. In the book, the author weighs in a very thoughtful manner the pros and cons of Christian beliefs. That is, the belief in a higher power, a God that would reconcile our sins on earth and save us to life everlasting. In the end, the author's conclusion is simply this: if so many people in the world have a deep-seated, unshakable belief in the existence of a God, it is highly unlikely that all of them are just wrong. Reading that book and discussing it with my father opened up a whole new level of conversation between he and I. He started by saying, "Son, I'm not 100% certain all the time exactly what I'm supposed to be doing while guiding this vessel," speaking of his human body, "through his lifetime, but I am certain anytime I need a course correction, there's one place to look for the right answer." As we talked about the book more and more, it finally became clear to me just how deep my father's faith actually was. With this understanding, it allowed me to see his life in a whole new context. I had watched, read, and listened to him do what he did in his life, and it was indeed incredible. I had observed and sought to copy how he did things in his life. Love one another, take care of one another, be kind to one another, treat everyone the way you would want to be treated, and help one another. And now the depth and strength of his why became clearer every day. This next memory is one I debated whether or not to share because Dad's faith was always something deeply private to him. There's only been one time when he brought up or discussed this particular revelation from his life with me, but I can remember it like it just happened. It was a beautiful afternoon, and Dad and I were just out killing time and enjoying each other's company while playing a round of golf at Spanish Oaks. Perhaps it was serendipity or something else that led him to begin his conversation on the 9th hole. Because at Spanish Oaks, the 9th hole is a blind shot from the tee. It's, if you will, it's a shot of faith. You can't see where your ball is going to land. You just have to line up, take the best swing you can, and have faith that it will be in a good place. For the next part, I need you to remember back to the early 1970, to the part of Dad's life story where he was a flight director on the Apollo 13 mission. It turns out there's much more to that story and the role Dad played. But first, some context. On separate occasions, I have had each of the three astronauts, the human souls that were aboard that outbound vessel, Jim Lovell, Jack Swigert, and Fred Hayes, pull me aside at various events and tell me in no uncertain terms they owe their life to my dad. He did, and what he did that night. Were it not for him, they were each convinced they would not have made it back. Even Ken Mattingly, the astronaut who didn't go on the Apollo 13 but was supposed to, has said, Glynn walked in, took over this mess, and he just brought calm to the situation. I've never seen such an extraordinary example of leadership in my career. Absolutely magnificent. I've had numerous other people who were in and around Mission Control that night tell me what a hero my dad is, but one person summed it up so incredibly clearly. When your dad entered the room, there was an immediate and profound, calming, pleasant presence. He came in, got to his desk, and immediately began collecting information, considering options, and making decisions in a way that was somewhat otherworldly. For many hours, he did this, never flinching, never backed down, and never making a wrong move. It was the most incredible thing I've ever witnessed in my life. So as we go back in the golf cart to go find my ball for the next shot to the green, and as we were accelerating up the cart, Dad said to me, Dad said to me, son, I have something I want to share with you. When I look back on my career, I've been privileged to be a part of accomplishing some remarkable things in my life. I have worked with some incredible people who are the best in the world at what they do. As I've gotten older, I've realized that perhaps the best work I've ever done as a professional was that night on the Apollo 13 mission. I spent hours making decisions, one after the other, sometimes with little more than my instinct or intuition to go on, doing everything I could to save those three souls aboard that vessel. We were the best there was, we had practiced, we'd done simulations, and we were their only hope. But none of that had adequately prepared us for what happened on Apollo 13, but yet every choice I made turned out to be the right one. Every decision moved us closer to getting those brave men home safely. And it's what he said next that caught me completely off guard. Of this, I am absolutely certain. When I replay that night over and over in my mind, I was not alone. I did not know what to call it or even how to describe it at the time, but now I do. It is absolutely clear to me that there was a presence in the room with me the whole time, guiding me, nudging me, helping me find the best path forward, and making it clear that was the path to follow. One of the greatest success against all odds stories in modern history, a true modern-day miracle, and the man in the room, the one who brought a profound, calming presence to the entire room, will tell you that in his time of dire need, the time when he needed all the help he could get, the higher power he had had faith in all his life was right there with him, guiding him through this crisis with perfection. That is truly incredible. One final remembrance, and then I'll bring this magnificent tale to a conclusion. We were granted the tremendous gift with my father, the gift of more time. When they managed to push my father's leukemia into remission, when the secondary cancer in the stomach was found, it was literally a gut punch to all of us. But once again, my father used this unexpected and unwanted change in the mission plan to turn what appeared to be an abrupt and unexpected failure into another wonderful mission accomplished. His body was no longer able to properly nourish itself, and it became clearer and clearer each day that Dad's time on this earth and this vessel he had occupied was coming to an end. Figuratively speaking, as the chutes were deploying and his mission here on earth was entering its final phase, that part when the human vessel is discarded and left behind and separated from the soul and spirit inside, he took one more opportunity to give us another, I remember a moment when, or a time when. As Dad's physical condition continued to deteriorate, each of us children were given the privilege of taking care of Dad, making sure he was safe, comfortable, holding his hand, or doing whatever it took to ease his pain and discomfort. He was reaching the point where the medications, lack of nutrition and fluids, along with his system shutting down, made it very difficult for him to be awake, aware, and alert. But on this, the last Saturday of his life, he asked me to get him up and take him to the back porch, so I did. My mom, my sister, my brother, and his wife and I joined him on the back porch, and it was a beautiful day. Shortly after we were all there, he said the first clear thing I'd heard him say in several days. "Son, will you get me a beer?" Wait, what did you say? "Can I please have a beer?" "You bet, one beer coming up." The next day, after I'd said what I knew were probably, in my heart of heart, final goodbyes to Dad, while I was driving back to my home in Austin, it hit me with incredible clarity. Dad was once again providing comfort to all of us. Through his actions, he was very, very clearly telling us, I, more than anyone else, absolutely know what part of this mission for me happens next. I do not fear, nor am I the least bit worried or concerned about achieving success on this next phase of my mission. I have prepared for this all my life. I knew it was coming from the time I was created. I am ready, and the best way I can think of to spend my final awake and aware moments here on earth is to have a beer with my family on the back porch and watch the golfers go by. What incredible courage, what incredible faith. In his time on earth, Glynn Lunney was a son, a brother, a husband, a father, and grandfather, a friend, a colleague, an acquaintance. No matter how you knew him, he was truly a remarkable person. He lived a life that surpassed his wildest dreams growing up as the son of a coal miner in Pennsylvania. He dared to accomplish great or even miraculous things, always trying to do them the right way, because he greatly believed we are here to accomplish something far more than just living out our times here on earth until we die. What a truly remarkable human being. Knowing what I know now about my father, his beliefs, where he was raised, how he came to be who he came to be, it is absolutely no accident or just fortuitous good luck that Glynn Lunney led the life he did, or that he was called to serve in the space program, or that he was a legendary flight director, or that he was a wonderful father, great friend, a soulmate to my mom, or that he was the leader in the room when all the odds were stacked against the crew of Apollo 13. He was blessed with a mind that always figured things out faster than most anyone else. He loved the idea and challenge of guiding a vessel through a tumultuous and often unpredictable mission. He's lived his life to the best of his ability in accordance with some pretty simple ideas. Love one another, take care of one another, help one another, be kind, and be patient with one another. It's not perfectly clear to me exactly when Dad came to the greater realization or understanding of exactly what his purpose was here on earth. I'm not even sure he would describe it exactly the way I'm about to. However, it is very clear to me that he did, and explains exactly why he lived his life the way he did. It's really quite simple. At some point, he realized that his soul and spirit given to him by God at the time of his creation were his own personal mission control. He learned to listen to them, take guidance from them, and follow their direction. He made certain to live his life in a manner that would, when his existence in a human vessel came to an end, ensure the most important parts of him would move on and continue the journey. There's just no other way to put it than he lived a truly incredible life. To bring my storytelling to a close, I want to briefly circle back to where I began. In the beginning, I asked each of you to think about the question as to why you chose to come or to attend this funeral via other means today. I don't know what conclusions you've reached on your own, but might I suggest one? Is it at all possible that your own personal mission control, your soul and spirit, has been reaching out to you, guiding you and encouraging you to love, help support, and comfort my mom and the Lunney family in our time of need? I don't know, maybe it's just a thought. Whatever motivated you to attend today and show your love, respect, and support to my father and our family, we absolutely cannot thank you enough for doing so.